Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of A Voice in the Hollow. I'm your host, Miguel Ortega, and this is my co-host, Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And today we have a special guest, Alon Helman, who helped us out on some of the shots on the film. And so welcome, Alon, to the show. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And yeah, he's going to go and show us his process. We've worked with Alon for a few years on a bunch of different projects at this point. And yeah, he's one of the fastest animators we've ever worked with. Every time we hire him, he turns stuff around really fast.
And it looks awesome.
Yeah.
It looks amazing.
Thanks. Oh.
Yeah. So yeah. How's it going, man?
Good. I'm in Amsterdam right now, so it's nighttime, so I'm just getting a little cozy, getting ready to present.
Nice. So yeah, do you want to kick it off? Let me put this little banner here so people could see your name. And yeah, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Alon Helman. I'm a senior animator, currently transitioning into games, but I've had about 10 years of experience in VFX and cinematics. Most of my time has been in at Luma. Actually, that's how I met Miguel. Worked on a bunch of Marvel movies, then wanted to try the freelance lifestyle in LA, and that was pretty fun.
How long were you at Luma for?
oh man, I think I was at Luma for about 2-3 years. Around, yeah. It was this amazing experience, just great opportunity working on Marvel movies, and that opened the doors to so many opportunities. And then landed a job at Blizzard, and Blizzard was sort of the dream job for most animators, just because he had, you know, stylized, realistic, and just so much attention to detail. But between Luma and Blizzard, I went into the commercial world and sort of worked on a lot of iterations when it came to projects. And so I had to learn how to animate super, super fast. And throughout the years, just gathered a bunch of workflows and sort of tips and hotkeys from industry professionals, and sort of kind of boxed it into to my own workflow, and it's something that I sort of like to share tonight with people here.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, you could just take over the screen if you want. Just press your share screen icon, and then you can just start.
Right. Let's see. I think you're seeing me. Okay.
So what are you doing in Amsterdam now? So you went over there to go work for another company, but are you still freelancing, or are you actually like a full-time employee somewhere?
Yeah, I just you know, now with the remote work stuff and just the possibility of being able to work anywhere, I've never been to Europe, and I kind of wanted to travel, and I just had an opportunity to come to Amsterdam. Can't really talk about where I am right now, just because it's I guess
Sure.
clear with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, just in Amsterdam. But I'm about to transition to another game company.
Cool.
And going into a leadership position, which would be pretty exciting for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
You're getting to travel. That's nice.
Yeah, you know, just
Places.
never had the opportunity to travel, and now, you know, I'm in Europe, and I can just visit all these different locations, and then I'll just head back home.
And really like experience them, not like just for a week or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and get paid for it, so that's pretty nice.
Is your next gig still in Amsterdam, or are you going to travel somewhere else?
It's gonna be fully remote, so it's just gonna. Right now, I'm local. It's a company in Amsterdam, but the gig I'm gonna take is fully remote, so I'm gonna have a chance to just go anywhere and just work from there.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Right. Yeah, man. Just kick it off. Show the goods.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my reel is a little outdated. If you can see my
press
screen.
that hide button just so we don't get that on top of your. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, awesome. So it's pretty much a collection of mostly things from Blizzard. I still need to update it, but this is sort of the latest I have on Vimeo.
Oh, I'm thinking. I don't let these images appear on every hollow bit in the world.
Since the change, I find I prefer my meat rare now. Raw, even. Perhaps struggling. We will fight our way back together! No, I'm staying here. But without you, Lieutenant, you took an oath to be a crusader. I won't leave you! My son. Yet once again, I am denied it. There was no honor in this. They will come for us now. All of them. And fear.
Balance and harmony are not easily attained. Extraction.
That's it. Kind of ends
That's
abruptly.
That's a lot
What's
of. That's mostly Blizzard stuff.
Yeah, this was just the latest stuff from Blizzard, and I have the other one that's a little mixed up from Marvel and some of the animations I did on El Nino.
Yeah.
But yeah, I won't bore you with the
How
other
long
one.
were you at Blizzard for?
At Blizzard, I was over there for close to 4 years plus another year and a half on the game team. So
Oh, wow.
most of my
That's
career was at Blizzard. Yeah, it was hard to leave. It was super hard to leave.
I'm surprised because I can see how it's ideal for animators because you have, like you said, diverse. So you're not just doing like in movies, you don't get that many creatures. It's just like the digi double here and there sometimes.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
there you have all kinds of characters from really stylized, realistic, and I can imagine you can have animals, like all kinds of stuff.
everything. Yeah, and it's such a again, it's like like golden shackles, right? It's you can never leave, and there's so many people who become lifers there. But I heard a really good podcast the other day about what is it that you're looking for in your career, because it's really hard to balance, the passion projects and sort of the financial side of things. And I think at some point I came into a crossroads where I was sort of just chasing more of the financial independence side and just the freedom to move around. And Blizzard in that sense didn't offer it. And so I chose to leave Blizzard, but it's such a magical place, and the door is still open, and I'm still considering one day going back there.
Sure.
Just because it's man,
Well,
it's
maybe they
owned
do
by
remote.
Activision, but it's such. What's that?
Maybe they do remote now after the pandemic.
No, but I think he's just
Mm.
talking about financial too.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it would make sense to maybe in a few years to go back, but it's if you want to work with just good people and sort of a flat hierarchy where you get to talk to the director and even give feedback to the director on your own shots, that's just the perfect place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So just you run the show for show us whatever else you got.
Sure thing. Yep. So Miguel came to me with a couple requests for an Anteater shot, and the turnaround time was pretty quick, and I tried to do it as fast as I can, and I'd like to share sort of the workflow with everyone. So let me just start the slideshow here. Here we go. I'm going to play 3 minutes. That's fine. So Miguel came to me with this Previz that you're going to see on the screen. And it was just pretty good. It wasn't too far from final, but it had everything that I needed to know. Sort of the interaction with the camera at first. I think that changed since, but the keywords when we talked were violent, impactful, and just really get it to feel as if it's let me get on to the next one. And after the Previz, he sent me this piece of reference, and I gotta say, I've never seen a giant anteater run, but it looks like a guy in a suit.
It looks fake. It looks fake. Yeah.
It looks fake, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting about the Anteater is that they run really differently from normal quadrupeds. They sort of do this weird skip with both legs, almost like one leg is limp, and they sort of catch on. So when I first started animating, it kind of messed with my sort of perception of what a quadruped needs to look like. And also, if you look at the front legs, they're just pretty straight. They don't bend as much.
No, they look
like stilts almost.
Yeah.
They look like stilts,
I don't
right?
have knees.
Yeah.
What's that?
I feel like they don't have knees.
Yeah,
Like
it looks like
like
there's no knees.
people that's running or something.
Did you ever see the stuntman for Planet of the Apes with the stilts?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what it feels like.
It feels like that. It feels like the tall guys from Dark Crystal.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. If they were to run on all fours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the ones that are on all four. Remember that they're walking like this, kind of like an ape.
Oh, yeah, on the stilts. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I basically had to work with. And this is just sort of a preview of the foundation to the entire animation. I'm going to be talking about the philosophy a little bit more in a bit, but the philosophy itself is just sort of trying to simplify it as much as I can and build on top of that. And it's called layered, and I'm sure some people have heard of it, some people have not. It's been used in feature, it's been used in VFX, and it's a very, very dynamic and a very flexible type of workflow. But again, the philosophy is just to keep it super simple and polish it in spline, which is past stepped, if anyone knows the jargon in animation. Again, I'll talk about it a little bit more later. So with those two curves that you saw in the graph editor, eventually took me to this. And play it one more time. And this, which was based on the Previz.
That looks great.
Yeah, just a little couple of breaths of the end. And again, all that started from just two curves in the graph editor that eventually built up on those curves.
So those curves being what? It's like the translate and rotations.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just the translate up and the rotation of the X of the body, and that basically dictated the timing and the spacing of everything else that follows: the head, the legs, and everything's connected. And I'll get to it in a bit. But before I do, I want to take a little detour, and it's just something that if there are any students in the chat room, you might have heard before, is that everything is a bouncing ball. And I'm a big believer that everything is a bouncing ball. And at the end of the day, if you do imagine everything as a bouncing ball, your life is going to be much easier. You're going to get to go home early. You're going to be able to do a lot more work and not really stress out about due dates. Here's an example. I don't know if you can see it smoothly on the screen, but here's a great example of just the concept and philosophy of bouncing balls in realistic creatures, cartoony creatures, and in anime. And the same can be said about VFX and realistic. But I want to be a little more specific about it and talk about that everything is in the motion rather than the poses. Most people are being trained in animation to think about just poses in the beginning, and then you sort of spline it, and then you see the in-betweens. And a lot of animators have a hard time when they do block in stepped, which is just pose to pose to pose, is seeing the transition between the poses. And we intuitively think in motion and fluidity. So 80% of everything is in the motion. Obviously, the rest is in the poses and is in the staging. We have to interact with the cameras. We sometimes cheat the camera. But what is motion and animation? So to me, it's the timing, the spacing, and the arcs. That's the umbrella that sort of controls everything else. And then the rest of the principles of animation would be squash, stretch, overlap, moving, hold, secondary actions. But all of those are going to be dictated by timing, spacing, and arcs. And here's a great example of two very, very different movies, or two very, very different styles of animation, but they hold true to the foundations, right? You have lines of actions, you have spacing, but the only difference here is the degrees of intensity. So you can see on the left, you have Wushu or Mushu from Mulan. And you can see he's following the same arcs or similar arcs, but he has a lot more stretch and a lot more bigger spacing. Whereas on the right, you can see Iron Man sort of whipping Hulk into the ground. And again, if you're a student here and you've done the bouncing ball exercise, that line of action is literally just a tail whip from the bouncing ball. It's just this sort of overlappy thing. And this is the reason why it's my favorite, one of my favorite shots in the movie. It's just so fluid.
You're talking about the Iron Man one, right? When you say your favorite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the left too, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny once you
It was
point
really
out how
interesting.
similar they are,
Yeah.
you really see it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So where do we start, right? That's the biggest question. And you know, when I was a student in the beginning of my career, and I even meet seasoned animators today, sort of, if you ask them what's your workflow, and they have to sit down with you and really explain the technicality of it, they would just look like this, you know, just trying to explain, and the person just listening is like what the hell are you talking about? And this is pretty much what I see a lot in the industry, is just not being able to package things into a philosophy that people can understand, a workflow that people can understand. So the solution in my case is layered approach. And this is, again, a workflow that's been used at Pixar. It's been used at DD, even game studios, and it's starting to take a popularity in a lot of studios. It's still sort of the underdog, but again, this is a method that really, really makes things a lot faster. And this is layered on steroids after I'm going to be done with this presentation. So the basics of the philosophy is animating the control with the most amount of movement, then polish that movement in spline, and then eventually copying those curves that you saw in the beginning to the rest of the body, almost like a domino effect. But it doesn't mean that I'm just copying and pasting and that's it. You just copy, paste, and then you start massaging those curves even further. What's this? Let's see. So again, this is the reference that I was sent. And when I start thinking about these things, I try to analyze what is the main or the prime mover when it comes to all this. What is the most simplified motion that I can get? And so, of course, it's the body. And I just overlaid this red sphere on the top of the body, and just wanted to really showcase what I'm looking at and what I'm thinking about when approaching this. And just like Miguel said, this is just a translation or rotation of the body. It's just going up and down and then rotating from side to side. And I'm disregarding the fact that it's moving in space and just looking at those two things. And the next thing I'm going to look at is the head. And what is the head doing? Right? Is it stationary? Is it overlapping? And in this case, it's pretty stationary, right?
Yeah,
It's
even
doing
a little
some
snap
overlap, but
almost feels completely rigid, right? It's not waving around the way you would expect.
exactly, yeah. And what's funny about this is that when I started animating the Anteater, I matched the sort of cadence of this Anteater, but it felt so slow in animation. And that's when you have to take creative liberties where you know, you have to either push the speed, push some of the poses, but again, you have a starting point. And when you have that starting point in a simplified way, it's way easier to sort of make those changes. I don't know if you remember when you approach me with a lot of changes, it's just easy for me to give you iterations upon iterations upon iterations. Sort of a non-destructive workflow. And then the last thing I look at is the feet. So the back feet and
So as you're animating, you're literally moving the torso first, and then you're moving the head, and then the feet. That's so funny. I would have thought the feet.
yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, the feet, if you think about it, the feet are being controlled by the upper body, right? The
Yeah.
head is being controlled by the upper body, the tail is being controlled by the upper body. So there's no sense in really touching all the secondary body parts and limbs unless you really have the main control or the main source of the movement
Driver. Yeah.
down to a T. Yeah. And so this is basically what it looks like. This is what I started with the body. Just a really basic up and down and sort of rotating. And you can see that it's kind of giving some overlap. It's still rigid, but there is something there.
This is all in Maya, yeah?
This is all in Maya, yeah. Yeah, I just used Maya to animate the circles just for the oh, formatting this video looks great on the device. Okay, I'm gonna have to show it here. So I'm just gonna bring this over here.
Yeah,
so
I don't think you're literally, like, just to be clear, I don't think Alon is literally animating circles at first. It's just, or are you? You're not doing that,
oh,
right?
no. Sorry, those circles were just for the presentation.
Yeah.
Just to show my thought. My thought.
Yeah, it's a way to visualize how you're thinking.
He's seeing those circles in his mind, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Kate said it looks like a gorilla run. It's very similar to a gorilla run. Yeah. So basically, let's see. Seems like it's going backwards. There we go. So this is what I'm starting with, right? Super rigid. There's not a lot going on. It's just the up and down and the rotation. And this is how I actually start. I hide the legs, I hide the arms, I hide the tail, and sometimes I even hide the head because it's distracting. And then I just bring in this overlap on the head, right? And you can see that I sort of took some creative liberty to give it a bit of an overlap. You can see the snout is not just pointing at the floor. There's a bit of an overlap.
Yeah.
And right away, what's that?
No, sorry. So, I was just gonna say that an anteater is one of those things. The way it moves and looks, like, I almost feel like if you don't add this stuff in and you animated it, like if it was motion captured with the most perfect mocap system on earth, it would still look fake. Like, it looks fake when it's real. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to do this.
Yeah, and the thing is that the Anteater in the reference had some of the hair sort of having secondary action, but I had none of it, so I had to find a way to, at least for me, for my sanity, to give it some organic sense, you know. So after the head, I moved on to the tail, and again the tail just sort of starts rigid, and then I just give it an overlap. And right away, I'm starting to feel this sort of fleshiness, right? Just kind of muscles and bones starting to form in this movement. After that, I move to the legs. And again, the backside dictates the legs. And, you know, when you see it without the front legs, it just looks kind of silly. It's just kind of a goofy run.
It looks kind of cool.
Yeah. But when I do approach the back legs, I literally just hide the front and I look at, I don't know if I'll just do it like this so you can see it. And I just treat it just as the backside and the legs as if it was a bipedal character.
And you really have to trust your process, because you have to see a bunch of steps ahead. It would be very easy to look at these early steps and be like just completely lost or discouraged, because you're like, the hell am I doing? You know?
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's a workflow that takes a bit of time to get, but it's training your eyes to understand the fluidity in a relative way. Basically, you know, the legs are relative to the hips, and the hips are relative to the chest, and the head is relative to the chest, the shoulders to the elbows. And once you start seeing that relationship form, then you're able to basically say, okay, the left leg is hitting the floor 4 frames before the hips drop, and you're sort of chiseling away at this rule book, right? This guideline on when things are happening, and the layered approach sort of allows you to do this in a really clean way, right? Because now once the upper body is done, I'm not really going to touch it. Maybe I'll touch it maybe 2%, but it's just done. I can just move on. And the problem with a lot of animators is when they do animate, they keep going back and forth, back and forth. They touch the leg, they touch the neck, they touch the tail, and they go back to the leg. And so that process takes, I'm not even joking, but it adds an additional week almost to the entire process.
Doesn't it end up stiffening it up a little bit, because the way you're working is so, it's almost like a sketch, like the circles that you draw before you start sketching. No, what am I saying? The circles you draw before you start putting in like the main forms. So it ends up giving the drawing more of a gesture and a smoothness to it. Whereas it almost feels like if you jump around to all the different parts, it's almost like you're starting to put in detail before the gesture is correct.
Yeah. So it's a different way. I mean, you kind of do this with traditional animation, because with traditional animation, you are concerned about the poses. So you do touch every single little control, and you pose it just perfectly for that one frame. And I think Tatoon was asking if
12 principles.
what's that?
I see here. On the 12 principles application character animation.
Yeah, I think you are talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do apply it, but in a different way. So when I look at the principles of animation, my priority is timing, spacing, and what was the third one? Totally forgot what the third one was.
That's what happens when you have a camera of filming your face as you're talking. You tend to forget stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what was the third one? Let me just exit my workflow. I'll tell you exactly. There we go. Arcs. Arcs are really important. Something I learned later on in my career. But timing, spacing, and arcs, and then I move on to the squash, stretch, overlap, moving holds, and secondary actions. So again, after this is done, then I give it all these different angles. I send it to Miguel, ask him, what do you think about this? He'll give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down. And then I take this run cycle and I move into space just to see if it feels right. And again, it feels goofy, but it feels like an anteater, right? It's somewhat rigid, but again, somewhat organic in a sense. And then I take that run cycle and I go ahead and just start to tweak it in order to get the performance that I want. So this started as a run cycle. I don't know if you can see it smoothly. But it started
playing, just so you know, like all the stuff you've been playing, like it's playing perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Like
yeah,
perfect.
It's very smooth.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So yeah, I take the run cycle, and then in those moments specifically, I will break the run cycle. I'll bake out everything, and then I'll push in that performance. And you can see that somewhere around here, he takes a turn and he slips. Boom, does this like little slide. I made sure that I overlap the tail here a little bit, and he just keeps on running with a head shake. And so all in all, I would say the run cycle took me about let's say 4 hours in total. And that gave me a chance to work on this, and this probably took maybe another 3 hours to
I
get to
remember
this
when you
level.
first sent us this, we were just like, damn, that
We were
looks
just blown
freaking
away
great. Yeah.
because it looks good and like, wow, that's so fast. And it felt so natural. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not
Uh,
an animator at all. So I find it really interesting how you talk about how some people think about the pose. And then my first idea of it, and again, I'm not very informed because I don't do any animation, was that, oh, you do poses, right? When I was doing the Clausen on top of this, because this guy has like pajamas, right? I did feel like when looking at your animation, like it felt so much more about movement than posing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is one of the downsides of this workflow is that uh, if you don't pay attention, your poses tend to be a lot weaker. And that's why the emphasis under my timing, spacing, and arcs is, being able to do moving holds, being able to hold some of the poses. But again, this is sort of an upside down process where poses tend to be weaker in the beginning of your process, and then later on you have to sort of strengthen them towards polish. So yeah, it was more about fluidity than the poses in that sense. And I wanted to go, before I jump into Maya, just to do a little demo, I wanted to share some of the tools and hotkeys that I use. And they are Aaron Corcel, which is a super, super oldie, but a goodie. I've been using it for pretty much since I was a student. And they're just a set of hotkeys. If you just Google his name, you can just go on his website, and they're just very simple mail scripts that you can map it to your keyboard. And again, I'm a firm believer that tools and hotkeys make your life and workflow way, way, way faster. And I actually sat down for about a week and calculated how much it could save me. So I did a week without hotkeys and a week with hotkeys, and it saved me an average of about 6 hours a week. From having to like open windows, drag windows, having to like click on, click off, doing all that. And so over a month, 6 hours per week isn't a lot, but over a month you save a lot of time.
It's half a week.
What's that?
It's half a week. You end up saving more.
Yeah, and so if you take a team of animators, you amplify that time saved. Tatoon was asking if I have I block the poses. Yeah, so my blocking process is literally this. I'll show it here. So this is blocking for me. This entire process is blocking. So I don't go into stepped. I just start blocking and spline. And blocking being, again, polishing those curves that really matter. Okay. Let me get in here. This is the wrong one. That's really cool. So I don't think I'll have time to get into the legs, but I also use this, by the way, if you do want to hide body parts and your rig doesn't really allow it and you're trying to, this is one mesh and there's no proxy rig here. This tool, FCM Hider, is free and it's on Gumroad. And I usually like to just take the faces of all these things and just hide them. And I think...
So is that like making groups?
Oh, it's
yeah,
like selection groups.
exactly. So instead of like having to, give it a different material and then, worry about the material, you just have it here in a really nice UI. And let's see if it'll do it. Great. It's not doing it.
Dude, I'm telling you, the
That's how
minute
live
you start
things work.
recording,
Yeah.
yeah, the minute
Everything
you
it
shoot,
breaks.
everything breaks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me try it again real quick. There we go. I think it's gonna work now. There we go.
Right.
So slowly, you know, when I first start to block, I just make sure I hide the things that I don't need to look at, because if the feet are static and I'm animating the upper body, it just gets distracted because all of a sudden there's just feet stuck in space while everything else is moving. So I'd rather not look at it. I'd rather just train my eye when I look at the references to just look at the body itself.
Which, you know, it's exactly how we would work if we're doing something in ZBrush. Or yeah, you'd be hiding like the legs because they're not done. You'd be like, "Ooh, I can't focus on everything when I have these like chicken legs on my guy. Just hide them." That's the way we would always work. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I always think about these things like you know, when you're drawing, like the traditional sense of things, when you draw or sculpt, you're always concerned about the bigger things, the bigger, broader brush strokes, you know. And you know, there's some people out there who get into the details and just do an amazing job. But I think when it comes to efficiency, when it comes to the industry, you know, you want to find a way to be able to replicate your results in a fast way. And, you know, and when I talk to a lot of animators in the industry, they, you know, they say it's like, oh, this is how I like to work, and this is just me, and I don't want to learn anything new. And you know, in a way, I was like, I hear you. You know, it's your workflow, your life, but at the same time, it's like this is a, you know, a studio. You're doing work for someone, and it just pays off to be faster. It just pays off to be a lot more streamlined and optimized when it comes to those things. Okay.
So this tool, is everything being put under the same group, or do you have the tail separate, the legs separate?
Yeah, so I can just now bring in my arms,
I see.
you know, my legs, and I can just hide them whenever I want to. And so let me just delete some of the animation so I can just start with the curves that I showed you. Just delete this as well. And I think this is pretty much, yeah, this is pretty much it right here. And let me bring my graph editor.
So you have a traditional animator, Deep Sea Homer, saying, yeah, we still do keys, breakdowns, then in betweens in traditional. At least that's the way I still like to work. So
Yeah. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. I think, you know, people understand and see different workflows in different ways, and whatever is comfortable with them. But again, I believe that this workflow, in the sense of efficiency and speed, is, and I want to choose my words carefully, but superior when it comes to just saving a lot of time.
sure.
But I've seen people who do it in step who are just beasts, just like completely, just really fast. So
When I see the way you work as a non-animator, it makes total sense. It's like, oh, that's how I would want to work. It makes sense to me. You're compartmentalizing these forms.
exactly.
And instead of like thinking about everything at the same exact time, it's less overwhelming, it seems.
Yeah. So I'm just deleting some keys right here just because I had to bake stuff. But this is pretty much what I started with right about here. And so if you look at these two, one of the things that like to point out is that, let me just get a pre-infinity cycle, is that they're pretty much the same curve. And what I did was take my up and down, and I literally just copied the up and down into my rotate. Let me get rid of buffer curves. And so now you're having this, if you can see the animation, it's a lot different, right? It's pivoting from the head. But one of the strong things about layered is that when you copy and paste, you start offsetting things. And if I just take this and start offsetting it to the side, and just scaling it up a little bit, you're starting to see a lot more overlap.
Very interesting.
Right? And again, I got these results in literally 2 seconds. And I didn't really have to worry about what the first pose is, what the second pose is. It's just polishing the movement, polishing the timing and the spacing. And after that, what's really cool is that I can take the neck of the Anteater, and I can choose to put my rotate, basically what I copied from the up and down, and just paste it on top of this, and just give this a cycle as well. And then start shifting it. Oh, there we go. And if I, that's not the right axis. It's supposed to be rotate Y, sorry. This is rotate Y. So again, if I just take the curve that I created for the up and down and paste it, and I'm just going to cycle it and start to, all right, I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. All of a sudden, if I do it little by little, maybe a little bit back, and if I want a lot of overlap, I can just scale it up. And
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, this is really like I'm like mesmerized.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating. I didn't even think like, again, I don't know anything about animation. I didn't think you could approach it like this. So
Yeah, like I don't want to say it's almost animating itself, but it's almost animating itself. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
it sounds very
and-
simple, but very advanced at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah,
time. Yeah.
Well, it's the cool thing about it is that everything organic moves this way. And you know, if you're looking at you know, if you look at what is it, kinesthetic studies where people walk on a treadmill or run or do jumps, or even like, you know, if a dog just runs, you see relationships between different body parts. You see relationships when it comes to and it's you can say it's a lot of math, but you can see it intuitively, but you can see you know, sort of these rhythms and relationships between arms, being that, you know, if the hips go up for 5 frames and drop for 5 frames, that means that, you know, the head is gonna drag up 5 frames and drop 5 frames. And so you have that relationship of 5 frames that you can take and then shift to the side and offset it. And again, it's just a very organic way of doing things. And that's why it works really, really well with realistic creatures. And so after I do this, and before I move on, there's another way that I kind of wanted to talk about, instead of copying and pasting, is sort of taking and this is a little more advanced, so maybe some people understand, some people won't. I do have this tool here, which is going to automate most of it, but I'm basically going to capture the data that's in this control. Right now, there's nothing on it. And what I'm telling Maya to do is go ahead and put a key on every frame and capture that sort of rotation and translation that this control has, and put it on a new control. And so if I look at my rotate Y, you can see that it's similar to what I pasted, but it's a bit different. And it's still the same animation, but what's really cool is that now I'm taking, instead of copying and pasting, now I'm taking the control. Let me just match these here a little bit. I'm taking the data and I'm offsetting the data, which is even cooler because you can do so much more with that. Instead of copying and pasting, let's say there's an area, let's say someone's holding a shield or has armor or something that just is secondary and just want it to be a little more natural, you can then tell Maya, just put all the information that's in that space into this control, and now I have all this information that I can do whatever I want with it. I can shift it, I can make it smaller, intensify the energy. So again, it's a really, really powerful way of doing things. And if anyone's interested in knowing more about that, I recommend go on Vimeo and look up Richard Lyko. He talks about this in a lot of detail, and he popularized that method a lot. Are there any questions at all?
No, I think everybody's just hypnotized watching the process.
Yeah, I hope it's not like too much.
I don't think so, because I can understand it, and I don't have background animation at all.
Oh, glad to hear.
Yeah.
So after I'm done with this, I can go ahead and just loosen up the hips, loosen up the chest, and I'm gonna go ahead and take this sort of world space approach and just bake everything onto the hips, which is this area right here. And I just kind of want to give it sort of a secondary bounce.
Got a little twerking going on.
A little bit of twerking. And post.
Oh.
And you can see that when it captures it, it doesn't capture it perfectly into a cycle. So I just have to make sure that it matches first and last frame. Make sure that these sort of are nice and clean. And I love to just get rid of unnecessary noise. So I'm just gonna keep all my valleys and peaks, and I'm gonna get rid of everything in between for now.
Now, is there a point, I mean, I'm jumping ahead here, where you do want to introduce some of that noise back in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? That's the thing we were talking about is start with the broad and then move in, to get all that dirt and all that detail. But at least now we have a clean foundation. So for example, later on in the polish, I can just start putting keys exactly where I want and just sort of giving it a bit of more of a realistic organic noise.
Yeah.
Right.
Because that's the part that, like, this part that you're doing is what's superior with hand animated, but then that noise is the part that I do like in some mocap, that little bit of imperfections. But yeah.
And if you look at mocap data, essentially in the bigger state of things, they look like this. There's always peaks and there's always valleys, but within those peaks and valleys, there's always going to be some noise that's going to give that, that dirt. You can do it manually and just insert those keys, but you can also use Animbot. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Animbot, but it's a super powerful tool that allows you to do a lot of things. And so just to do that, I tend to just put a bunch of keys in there. So I just drag this little hotkey, and then I think, license is invalid. Great. And then this one. So this one's basically gives it some noise, like random noise.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I just leave it, right, if I want more of a mocap feel to it.
That's great.
Yeah.
So in your eyes, when you look at animation, can you tell when something's been mocapped?
Yeah, definitely. But things are getting.
We
can always look at
but
at a model and tell if it comes from a scan.
Yes, I can tell.
Yeah.
It's always a scan and not a scan.
Yeah, I think after a few years, you're able to develop that eye.
Yeah, I just think it's very interesting that you have that eye. Of course, you would have that eye, but it's just fascinating.
Yeah. Although, you know, what's funny is that it's just getting so blurry now. I think what was it? I think it was when Love, Death, and Robots came out. I think the second season, and me and my coworker were just sitting down and like he thought it was real. He thought it was like a real actor, and he's an animator of like 10 plus years.
On
And
what? On the like the Conquistador?
no, not the Conquistador. I forgot what it was. I forgot exactly what it was. I think it was like a soldier.
Oh, is it the last one where they go and they see the Cthulhu?
That's a
No,
soldier.
no. It was something about like sitting by the fire. There were a few shots where he thought that the actual person was real,
Oh, that's
and I thought it wasn't real, but he convinced me that it was, and eventually it was CG. But it just gets to that point where it's just there's a really
feels so
big
real.
blurred line. So from there on, I move on to the tail and I move on to the legs. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just kind of want to go over maybe the back legs real quick.
You definitely have the time.
Someone
so,
asked, is
so,
it the
so,
tall
yeah.
grass? No, right? It's not the tall grass.
The tall grass?
Yeah, the love, death, and question.
I don't know if Alon would remember the name of the episode.
No. But it was, I just know it was like a futuristic soldier and it was sitting by the campfire. That's all I remember.
Oh, it's that post-apocalyptic one where there's a yeah.
It's about the
Maybe?
one. It's the one with the kids. The future.
No, where he goes and he buys something at like a little city. It's kind of Mad Maxy, and then he goes and he sits by a fire. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
It's
I'd have
okay.
to-
We'll never
You're
figure
gonna
it
have to have like a second stream just for that.
out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I start on these legs, I don't know why my Maya is being super slow right now. Oh, there we go. Let me just zero everything out here and just delete everything. Delete. So I'm done with my upper body. I'm done with everything. This is basically what it looks like.
He's
And,
literally twerking. Like I was joking earlier, but now he's
but it looks
literally.
like it's working, yeah. And that's why I hide the things, because it's just so distracting, right? You're like, well, I can't really see anything
I
if
could
the
totally
legs are there.
see. I could see that.
Yeah. And so what I do is again find those relative pillars, those relative poses that I need. And if you look at the reference, for example, if I can find it. There it is. Let me close this.
Go.
I'm looking at, and again, this is going back to the fundamentals of animation. I'm trying to find my contact pose. I'm trying to find my passing pose, my up pose, and back to the contact pose. And I'm just looking, and I'm just concerned about the back legs, not really the front legs. And again, I'm just making this mental effort to ignore everything else and just look at the backside and the legs. And so right here is the contact point. You can see the toes up. And this is frame 9. So I'm trying to see where the cog is on frame 9. So I know that the cog meaning the center of gravity, the hips. I know that it's on the way down, and boom, this is where the contact pose is. And I'm going to ask myself, what happens after this? Is are the hips going to drop some more? Are they going to go up? And sure enough, they drop a little bit more, but then they go up the next frame. So that tells me that the lowest point of the hips, which is somewhere around here at 6, this is where my contact pose is going to be. And now I'm just following literally Richard Williams and his poses of of a walk cycle. If anyone's familiar with that, this is and this is for bipedal, but still applies for a quadruped. Contact pose, down pose, passing pose, up pose, and contact. And what I'm really concerned about right now is my contact pose, my passing pose, and back to the contact pose. And then I'm going to find my down pose and up pose. And this is a little similar to sort of key poses and breakdowns. But again, this is, to me, a little rule book that I can follow, a guideline. So this is somewhere around here. I'm going to pose it. And again, just for the purpose of demo, I'm just going to roughly pose it. I'm not going to get too perfect about it. And then I'm going to key it. So now I have my first pose. And then I'm going to find my passing pose. And I usually have an image plane in Maya, but I don't really need to. And then I'm going to find my passing pose, and the passing pose is somewhere around here. Again, you can see that I still have a contact with the back leg, which is the left leg, and right here this leg is passing. And this is, if I'm counting this from 9, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames, but I really want to make sure that this is something that's happening relative to the cog, or again, the hips. So it's going to be somewhere around the high point of the hips, and maybe 3 frames before the highest point of the hips. Because this is, I'm assuming right here at 18 is the highest point. So I'm going to count back 1, 2, 3, about 3 frames. And I'm not going to be a stickler about whether it's 3 frames or 2 frames. Again, this is an organic process. And if it feels off, I'm going to try 3 frames. If it feels off at 3, I'm going to try 2 frames, maybe even 4 frames. But again, I only have 1 key and just a bunch of wiggle room. So let me make sure that at 9, yep, I had it wrong. So this is actually forward, my bad. And this is back. There we go. And so I'm going to find my high point. And then he's dropping around here. So I'm going to go back 2 frames. And I'm going to find my passing pose and bring this back. And I don't know where the knee, oh, there's the pull vector. I can start playing with the pull vector just to bring it out a little bit. And so now I have my contact pose, boom, going into the passing pose, and then I'm going to find my contact pose again, and then I'm going to have this cycle in a matter of 10 minutes. So I'm going to look at my reference again. So I have my passing pose, and again my contact pose, which is 3 frames before the drop, right? 1, 2. So 1, 2, somewhere around here at 15 or 16. This is going to be going to go into the contact pose. And I can just look at my left view. Somewhere around here. It's wrong feet. Got to keep this going forward. And then this back. Yep. And then back to here. And I think at this point, I'm going to look at my cog. It's going to go up and somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the mid. So what happens after my contact? I have sort of this passing pose where both legs are kind of similarly somewhere around here. And then I can copy this to here, to the beginning. Right? It's a bit dirty, but it's still right. It's working. And now all I have to do is massage it. All I have to do is basically find the passing pose correctly, and then I can do this in the graph editor, or I can just do it in the viewport.
What do you usually use? Just kind of both, right? Jump back and forth.
I rely heavily on the graph editor, but I know that whenever I do this on the graph editor, people sometimes just kind of look at it and it's like, I don't know what you're doing.
Well, the thing is, for a non-animator, the graph editor is almost like in Neo when he starts seeing the ones and the zeros. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing that's a bit scary about the graph editor is, there we go. And this needs to go a little bit further here. Let's copy it. Is that when you look at just curves, you have no idea what it relates to. And that's why, to me, it's just you have to keep it very, very, very simple. Right? And I kind of did a normal sort of run cycle here. Again, you got to pay a little more attention to the Anteater. But eventually, you know, the way it sort of steps, you know, I got to offset the legs. But now I only have, that's the beauty about this workflow, is that if I need to make any changes, I only have this much keys. It's not a lot, you know. And if you come to me and say, Alon, look, it feels a little too even, or it feels like the feet are not really galloping, and they just seem like they're running, I'll be like, okay, well, let me try something. Let me move these forward a little bit, and or maybe let me try to actually cycle all of this first. And then I can just take all of it and just try to move it forward or move it back. And again, for the purposes of...
Oh, it does change it. It's pretty amazing.
Right, yeah, so there's the gallop. Now I just have to really like tweak it a little bit better. So, you know, if it wants to cooperate. Yeah, this is translate X. So my Y here, I can then just bring down, make sure it's over here. Right, and I can just tweak it to my heart's content. And the legs are the hardest part, obviously, but let's see.
They're the hardest part because there's so many different. There's the point of contact. There's the torso is much more forgiving. You're saying.
Yeah. But then again, the torso is the thing that dictates everything. So here we go. Boom, boom. And this will go up. And also the way the pivot points are a bit, there we go.
So how much does it matter that those curves are smooth?
In what sense?
Well, like, does that affect the performance a lot? Like, do you look at those curves and say, "Oh, I need them to flow a little bit better," or no?
Yeah, I actually do, and it's something that you know, when I first start, like I always tell myself the curves need to look pretty, but that's not always the case, right? You know, sometimes nature isn't perfect, so you know that kink right there that I see, I'll probably delete it and see what happens. And I just slowly just clean my curves and make sure that, again, I see a kink here. I'm just gonna make sure that this is flowing into what it's supposed to flow. But that's not to say that if a character is sort of abruptly stopping because of its, you know, because of its muscles, you know, it's just sort of tensing up. That curve's not going to look pretty, right? There's going to be some type of a stop in that energy flow. So, for example, this will go down, and I guess just like Neo seeing the numbers is like this timing here is so big, but then if it stops abruptly, and it's going to have some type of you know, rebound up.
Sure.
And so now I know that this will yield or result the, you know, what I need out of the animation, that sort of like flow and stop and a little bit back. Yeah. So then I just keep going onto the, you know, the tail, the legs, and then little by little, then I go in and I really pay attention to the frames, and then I would really fix it frame by frame if things don't work as well. But that section of polishing it frame by frame, you know, if everything, the foundation is there, would take about probably an additional hour and a half, 2 hours. So again, that this sort of frame fudging that happens is very, very minor, as opposed to having to deal with the entire thing frame by frame.
Now you didn't, of course, you didn't start out like knowing like where you're at right now, right? So when you first started animating, did you always animate with these like principles in mind and this technique, or did you evolve into this workflow?
It evolved. I took when I was at the academy, we had a mentor from Pixar who you know, has worked on The Incredibles and Ratatouille, and he came. Well, he didn't come up with this workflow, but he gave lectures about it, and so I took his workshops, and it blew my mind. I remember when he first talked about it, and you know, it was a series of classes for 14 weeks. So we had time to sort of process and understand this. This is, you know, this is just a quick overview, but it gets a lot deeper into the philosophy of layered process. And once he did that, it sort of blew my mind. But the thing is that when I got into the industry, most studios didn't accept or didn't like or didn't even know that workflow. And so whenever I showed something as a work in progress, you know, the director or the supervisor or the lead would be like, dude, what the hell is this? And I remember one time a lead looked at me as if like if I made a mistake hiring this guy, you know? And
So like other, you mean lead animators? Like
yeah. And when I was a junior and I started playing around with this, and I would present it, and I think I would present it a little too early. And I was like, yeah, what do you think? They would expect poses, right? They would expect the animating. So it's like, what is this? What are you showing me? This looks too simple. And so quickly I learned that I can't really show it too early on. And if I wanted to show something that's in stepped, I basically had to do it in stepped. And so I would say the first 3 to 4 years of my career, I sort of did stepped in the studio, but then I continued to do layered on the side on personal projects. And it got to a point where I got fast enough in the commercial world where I was able to sort of present something that was 80% of the way there as blocking. And that's when, you know, directors or leads were like, dude, really? You did this in like a day or 2 days and this is almost finished? And so then I learned that I had to like be a little slower because then they pile up way more work on you, and so you have to find the balance. Yeah,
that's what happens. You gotta pace yourself.
You think that because you get it done fast, you're gonna get a medal. It's not.
No, they're just gonna give you more shit to do.
Yeah, because you know when you're young in the industry, you just want to impress and you want to be able to just get some validation out of your lead, out of your supervisor. So you're like, I'm just gonna do this like as fast as I can. I'm gonna try to like get the you know, the quality up there, but you know, they look at it, they're impressed, but then they just pile on like 10 more shots, and then
Well,
you just
I got a friend. You know him, Mauricio. He was working for a company years ago, like when he was first starting out, and he was doing like crazy overtime, just staying, and he wasn't getting paid. He was like, "I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna blow their mind. I'm gonna do all these extra hours and get the work to be as good as possible, as fast as possible." And Tran and I would constantly be like, "Dude, you shouldn't be doing it for free like that. I don't know if they're going to appreciate it." And he finished it, and they were like, "Wow, this is amazing. You got it done so quickly. Well, I guess we don't need you anymore." And they laid him off.
oh
And
my
it's
god.
yeah, it totally backfired on him. Like the work was done. They didn't need him anymore. He got laid off, and it was like, ooh. So
Yeah. I mean, there's the other side of things where, you know, there are animators who stay overtime without getting paid, and they don't really clock it. And when you know, Soup sees it and is like, "Oh, that's great. How come everyone else can't do this?" And then they push everyone else to try and match that,
Yeah.
they
and
set
then it just ruins everyone's morale. You know?
yeah.
Yeah. You have to pace yourself with your team.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly. Yeah.
they don't go, well, this guy did this, and he got it done. He or she got it done this fast because they spent all this extra time. They don't like even look at that, or it's like invisible to
Right.
them. They just go, everyone else
Exactly.
has to be at this time too. Yeah.
And then all of a
So
sudden, expectations are just skewed. You know?
yeah, they're distorted. But that's a symptom, a big thing of the VFX industry. Yeah,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
just pushing more. Now,
Yeah.
when you talked about like layered approach, so then you kept saying step. So step is like a principle, and then layered is a principle. Is that what
They're both workflows. Yeah.
workflows? Okay.
So stepped is when a character sort of moves in. Let me try to do it here. So this is stepped. So when a character moves like this, I mean, obviously it's a little broken, but
It's like a
when there is no motion in between poses.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is step. That is the traditional way of. Let me just hide the legs because it looks so ugly with the legs. Yeah, so this would be stepped when the poses are just there and there's no motion in between. And this is the sort of the classical way of animating, even in the industry nowadays. It's the standard way of animating. And what that does is that you're getting really nice poses and you're really working that in, but you're putting information on almost every 3 frames of the animation. And then you have to spline it. Then you have to make it smooth. And with all that information, all of a sudden you're looking at a curve and there's just like a key on every 3 frames. Now you're presented with a ton of data that you have to clean up. And so a lot of animators keep that data there because they're scared of losing what they blocked in. So now they're having to move 5, 8, 10 keys instead of like 3 keys. And that takes a lot longer. And just multiply that over, you know, the 3 translations, 3 rotations times, you know, like, I don't know, 80 controls. So it becomes it becomes really daunting for animators.
I mean, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Just by the way you're talking about it. So now you always work like professionally. Do you still work step, or are you always now doing layered? Because
I do a little bit of both. It really depends on the studio. It really depends on who's looking at your work. And so it's I think wise to just not get rusty with certain workflows.
okay, so you're
But
pretty
there's
bounce back and forth between the two.
yeah, I bounce back and forth, but there's a workaround where I can still do it as layered, and then I can just take that, and this is a little more advanced, but put it on an action layer and then make it into stepped. So whatever they will see, they'll see it in stepped, and then I can continue doing it in layered. So it's a little trick that I learned from someone. Yeah,
That sounds,
it's hard to let
that
go of
sounds,
layered.
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I got to show this.
Yeah.
No.
Does anybody have any questions for Alon? So someone is asking who makes more money, animators or
I don't
VFX
know.
artists. I
Well,
think the answer for that is always. I used to hear like there's like you can only make so much money if you're a modeler, and then I realized you can actually make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money in any one of the tasks if you're at
Exactly.
the highest level.
Yeah, so you can't compare, you know, a junior VFX artist to like a senior animator in their salary, right? So there's always like ranges. And I used to think like, oh, you're capped. If you work, for example, a modeler, they would say, oh, you're capped. You can't get higher than that. But then I have friends that are so good at sculpting and modeling, and they're making like double what a senior would make because they're exceptional at what they do. So I don't really know. Yeah.
So you're getting some compliments.
Yeah, it's from
Yeah.
Jared.
Thanks,
Who
Jared. My pleasure. Yeah, another thing about that is that it really depends on where you are and what studio hires you. I remember when Riot was literally poaching artists from different companies. They just right away just 6 figures.
I actually heard about that, about the riot times.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Because
remember like my friends at Blizzard, they're like, "Peace, I'm out of here." It's, you know, and it was they were just like doubling their salaries, you know, just because they just wanted them.
That's epic right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
Epic is
Epic.
stealing because they have deep pockets,
And
obviously.
Apple for modelers, like
Oh,
you have some
man.
of the best modelers in the world are working for Apple, and you're like,
What are you
"But
doing
what
there?
are you doing at
I
Apple?"
know, man. Do
But
you
they're
know
making
Vaughn?
some serious.
Who?
Vaughn?
No.
He was at Tippett. Anyways, he went to Apple, got like
As a
a
modeler?
crazy salary, and then he called me. He's like, "Dude, I am so bored.
He's
I'm
a
not
modeler.
doing anything." He's a modeler, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous money, but he wasn't doing much.
So someone is saying if you were doing a project, a cartoon,
Alone.
Alone.
What would you focus on?
I don't know what that question is.
Well, I guess like indie or
Like in the animation workflow?
Yeah, that's a very broad question. Does that mean like what he would focus on story wise, his workflow?
Yeah, it's a little broad,
Yeah.
but you can answer
Yeah.
it however you want.
Well, if it's workflow wise, I would approach it the same way. Short film. I would approach it the same way. I would just push again. This is sort of intensifying the arcs, intensifying the spacing and the timing, and just build the performance that way. And again, once that's amplified, everything else follows. So the squash and stretch has to match the spacing, the intense spacing that I just built. The overlap has to match, you know, the really quick timing and the really broad arcs that I made. And that's why, to me, those three are the foundations of either VFX, realistic, cartoony. I mean, they all work in that sense.
Yeah. Tran, any other thoughts? Any other questions?
Um,
So if anybody wants to find out more about you, where can they get more info?
That's a good question. I don't have a lot of social media about my work. I just have my demo reel. I do want to start sort of posting a little more.
yeah,
But
a lot of really good artists don't have sites or
yeah,
or like anything. Like they're just kind of invisible to the public. Some of the most amazing people you've never seen their work. It's just,
yeah. I'm blown away at some people. I always push them. I was like, dude, you have to put your knowledge out there. And no, it's fine. You know, I just like to keep it, you know, to the studio and just, you know, they care more about a smaller team. But you know, I guess I'm a hypocrite because I also don't do it.
Yeah.
think this is the first time I actually went on a podcast or a
Oh,
presentation.
it's so awesome.
I
I
think
was
it was
like,
one of our best. Yeah.
yeah, I'm super interested. I think I would be the worst animator.
So someone is asking if you use.
Anyone can be an animator.
No, I would be terrible.
They're asking if have you used Cascadeur for animation? I don't know what that is.
No, I'm not really sure what that is. Cascadeur. No, I used 3ds Max way back in the day, and Maya. Oh,
How do you
I'm looking at it right now. I've seen Cascadeur. I've seen this. This is like a physics-based type of animation package. Yeah, I've seen the demo, but I've never done it. Never touched
how do you like the tools in animation in Maya? Like, do you feel it's like does everything you need, or
Oh, where did you guys go? Hold on a second. Oh, there you are. That's the thing. You get used to a certain software, and it's just hard to change. But you build hotkeys and muscle memories there. So I feel very intuitive in Maya. If you put me in Blender, I'm lost.
So what are the tools are you using from Morgan? Because I know Morgan from Tippet.
Yeah, I use the rotation order tool that he has a lot.
Yeah.
And I think he has another one for switching spaces that I use. So those are the only two that I use from Morgan. Most of my hotkeys are from Aaron Crosell.
I see.
And then this one, World Space, which I use, I mean, on a daily basis. This is amazing.
That's like one of your
this is also amazing for mocap. If you're using mocap, and you have, since mocap is all FK and you have some sizzle, let's say on the bottom spine, and it just goes all the way up to the head, and you're trying to find exactly what it is, and it takes forever. What you can do is just take any control, and instead of that joint or control being dependent on the spine, you just take all that data and you put it into world space. And that means that it's just free of any type of control from any other joint, and you can just clean it. So if you have any sizzle in the spine, now you can just clean the chest and not worry about the spine at all.
I see.
do you deal with mocap a lot?
I'm not a big fan of mocap. I haven't done mocap in a while. But yes, from time to time I deal with mocap.
Is it? I guess I just wonder if it's equivalent, like my background is in sculpting and texturing, right? So if I am given a scan, it's like really super boring, tedious work to clean it up. Is it the same with mocap? Is it like just a process of cleaning it, or?
Yeah, there's a sort of a divide in the animation world. Some animators, it's this little civil war that's happening. Some animators say that mocap animators on real animators, and then it's just sort of this back and forth. But I think to be a really good mocap animator, you have to really understand the fundamentals and the principles. But the thing is that yes, it becomes kind of tedious and boring because you're dealing with data on every frame, and so cleaning it takes way longer because you can't delete anything because you need that performance in there. You need that little sizzle here and there, and it's very destructive to delete it and then try to bring it in. So to an animator that comes from hand keying, from just animating without mocap, it becomes a lot more restrictive and there's a lot more constraints to it, and so then it becomes kind of boring.
Yeah, we wish we could have done this project with all having a team of animators, but it was impossible. We would never get it done.
Yeah, it would not.
We had to do it with mocap because we're not animators. If we
but I think
were,
even if we were, it would still take us a very long time.
With this workflow, no, I'm just kidding.
It would still take a long time.
10 minutes of information.
It's a 10-minute short. So
give me 2 weeks. That's good.
Let me see how many frames we have total. We have almost 14,500 frames of animation.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no live action person walking around.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by mocap animator? Like, what is a mocap animator?
So a mocap animator is you know an animator who cleans mocap, who just exclusively deals with mocap.
Oh, okay.
With motion capture data. So just cleaning up mocap. Pretty
Luma's
much.
very much gone very heavy on mocap, right? Like a lot of companies are getting much more into that. Like when I talk to Raf, which is a mutual friend of ours, like they're very much using like the Xsense suit over there.
Here's a question here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not showing up. What made you interested? Well, you don't rig, right? But what made you interested in
don't rig.
animation?
Well, it's a good question. I think I was when I was a kid, I was always into filmmaking. I loved visual storytelling. I was, you know, when I went to see a movie, it just really affected me. And I remember watching Starship Troopers, and it just hit me that I wanted to be part of that world. And one of my goals was to work for Tippett, because you know Tippett worked on the creatures in Starship Troopers.
Which you did get to work for. We both got to work for, but
Yeah, and it was an amazing experience. But yeah, it's just sort of this visual storytelling. I just wanted to be part of it. And in high school, I took some, you know, like filmmaking classes here and there, and you just take that little camera and you just sort of edit and all that stuff. But I just heard about animation. I didn't really know what it was, and you know, knowing that you're able to control the camera, you're able to basically direct shots in this software on your computer just appealed to me, and decided to go to the Academy of Art. I heard they had the Pixar classes at the time, and give it a try, and I fell in love with it immediately.
so you went in there already knowing you wanted to do animation. You didn't, because let's say, for example, at Gnomon, a lot of people come in and they're not really sure what they
Yeah.
want to do right away. It takes them a couple of classes, a couple of terms to be like, oh, I want to be an animator, I want to be a modeler. You already knew you wanted to be an animator.
Not really, because the academy at the time was just like Gnomon. They basically gave you a plethora of classes. So you know, I took some modeling, I took some rigging, and they were all interesting. But when I saw some of the students animate, there was just so many layers to it, and you know, there was like the psychology of how they move, how they talk, like the acting choices, and I think just my brain gravitated a little more towards that than modeling and rigging. But you know, I'll tell you what, like even now in my career, I envy, not envy, but you know, it's just when I see modelers and I see, you know, people who do these things outside of animation, I'm just blown away. It's just pure magic, like the attention to detail and being able to just tell a story through one frame. Just awes me. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, animation is like a complete enigma. Like I'm like, huh? Right? Like it's just a total art form that I don't understand. Like, well, like I go, okay, I know what it is, of course, but like understanding the workflow, it's just a different art form. So you went straight to like 3D animation. You didn't dabble in 2D or anything like that. Like you just knew I want to be 3D.
I think Academy does make you do some drawing stuff, right?
Yeah. We did some traditional stuff the first year, which was great. I loved it. And then we took a 2D class as well. But it was just very simple stuff. You know, it was like a flour sack.
Yeah.
It was a bouncing ball. You know, like just to understand 2D. But you know, one of my mentors, the one from Pixar, for example, did not take any of the 2D stuff, didn't love it, just hated it, you know, because to him all he wanted to do was animate. And you know, he didn't know why he was sort of taking a modeling class, he didn't know why he was taking a drawing class, because it had no real significance behind just the essence of animation. You know, some people would argue differently, but you know, he's one of the most talented animators I know, and you know, he's won I think it was like an Annie for his shots on Ratatouille.
Amazing.
So yeah, so it's like, you know, it's nice to have on the side, sort of drawing and knowing, understanding 2D, but it's not very necessary in this industry, and just to really understand the art of acting, because that's basically what it is. It's just the art of acting.
Yeah.
I
So you
mean,
have a bunch of questions.
yeah.
So
Sure.
I put one up on the screen. Yeah, well, you can just read it.
Let's see. Thank you for the reply. Question, if I may, the Pixar cartoon turning red, the artist moved away from Pixar. Yep. How do you strike a balance between realism and artistic embellishment? In other words, yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of the progression reels that animators have. Uh, you know, reference is key. It's very, very important. Even for someone who's been in the industry for 15, 20 years, even they can't really calculate every single movement that the body will go through. And so reference, you know, shooting yourself with a camera is really, really important. So you have to start from realism. You have to start from a place that is, you know, connected to real life. Because if you just jump into animation without any reference, you're going to lose some believability. And so, for example, you know, turning red. I haven't seen a lot of behind the scenes work, but there has been a lot of people who use reference, who shoot reference. There are also a lot of people who just draw thumbnails and do not shoot reference. And I think one of the movies that used a lot of thumbnails and storyboards was The Bad Guys, because that one's super pushed. That's beyond realism, right? It's just the suspense of disbelief. You know, they're sort of like frozen in the air. So in that case, you're able to move away from reference, right? But again, it's a very, very specific style versus a Pixar style. So again, turning red was maybe a little more in the extreme, and there was less reference, but a lot more attention to poses, for example, than references. If that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
And it almost ties into, it's kind of a similar question here. When you're shooting reference for animation, how do you break away from mannerisms getting into your shot? Especially when you're working with a team. I guess, like, how do you make sure it doesn't feel like Alon's version of
Yeah.
the orc?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's definitely a team effort, and I've seen this work with people who communicate well, and I've seen this not work with teams that don't really communicate. And so the key thing to understand is that it's a collaborative effort. And so before, you know, any of us jump into any shots, especially at Blizzard, we sit down with the director. We sort of talk about the style that we need to hit. And then either the lead or some of the animators do pre-production tests, and we sort of establish a cohesive style. And we then take that as an inspiration for animation. At that point,
When you say that you guys decide on like, what does that mean? Like, you're sitting in a room and you're looking at reference of The Rock wrestling or whatever and saying, like, look how he does this, this, and this? Or are you guys actually creating like a shot of, is someone animating the guy walking or just kind of being idle and being like, that's how we want him to move?
Yeah. So I mean, all of that, a little bit of both. So for some, you know, for some projects, we would look at inspirations like The Rock. You know, like if we want this guy to sort of act and behave like The Rock, we'll gather a bunch of reference. And it's like, okay, we want that personality, but we don't want it to look just like The Rock. We just sort of have an inspiration. I think that's the key difference between rotoscoping, which is just copying what you're seeing, versus inspiration. And it's important to say inspiration in this case, because once you take that essence, you know, we sit down and then we talk about the style of animation as opposed to the personality, right? And is the style of animation going to be pushed? Is it going to be more like anime? Is it going to be more realistic? And then we look at, for example, a montage of a certain style of animation. So you know, we would maybe look at, for example, the bad guys, and say, you know, we really like how they're sort of holding poses for way long. We want to incorporate that into our sequence. And so we would then sit down and talk to the lead, to the supervisor, to the director, and just come to an agreement. And then we have the pre-production time where we do tests, right? So run cycles, jumps, behavioral things, and they're just standalone shots. And then we'll have dailies or weeklies where we sit down with the director, with the soup, and we'll go over what works, what doesn't work, and that basically sort of hones in onto an exact style. And everyone's involved in it. And so everyone gets basically this sort of roller coaster ride into what it's going to turn into eventually. So that way we sort of have a cohesive style. And sometimes, you know, sometimes animators stray away from it, but we look at it in the edit. And so we call it out. And little by little, we just work and massage it in. And so we never look at one shot. If it's, you know, if it's cinematics or feature, we never look at one shot. We always look at it in a sequence of.
You have to, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, 3 to 5 shots around that shot.
Now, if there's like 3, 4 shots in a row, do they usually try to give the same animator that sequence so there is a continuity across them all, or do they break those shots up?
I'd say mostly they'll give the that little edit to an animator, but it depends on the studio. But most of the times they'll give the animator like 4 shots in a row.
I see.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference? I mean, we're talking about, like, to me, I mean, all this is very fascinating, like more realistic mocap, and then something very stylized, like you said, the bad guys. Do you have a preference of like what kind of style animation that you like and how you animate?
That's a great question. I think it's like, you know, it's like music. You just go through phases, you know, when you just listen to something for, you know, for months, and you're like, okay, I'm ready for something else. And it's in a way, you know, when you get familiar with one style, it's sort of out of habit, and you just kind of become accustomed to it. And I think at that point, you know, a lot of animators either move on from a studio, or they sort of, you know, if a studio has multiple projects, they'll try to move on to something with a different type of style. But me personally, I like to sort of swim between pushed realism to cartoony. And I think cartoony is something that I'm still sort of learning in a way. You know, it's a very hard transition from realistic, which is where I started my career in.
Because you're kind of forcing yourself to, you have to kind of lose all subtlety, right? It's all about extremes rather than when you're doing photoreal.
Yeah, that just seems so different. Like from where, like, my background is, like, I do realism, and then if I have to do, this project we did was hard, very hard for me.
This project stylistically is the most polar opposite from the Ningyo you could possibly go.
The background that Miguel and I have is film, so it's all realism, and all the surfaces have to feel real, and then the lighting, and then this one we had to go stylized because of limitations. Well, and we're doing it all on Unreal, and we didn't want to make it realistic, so it was hard.
I mean, you guys are dealing with so many moving parts, but I mean, did you enjoy doing the stylized more than realistic?
No.
No,
not at all. It was very it was all just a matter of, like, it was almost like we you know, it's we're doing this project just for other people when they're listening in. It's for artistic reasons, like because we want to tell a story. So the whole main part of it is art, right, and storytelling. But the choices that we made in terms of why it looks the way it was because of limitations. So it was almost like, okay, we are just 2 people. We can't go real because we can't support a team like that. We don't have those resources. We have mocap X, and then we have mocap suit, and the facial thing was a big thing as far as like how far we could take it. So we had to
Yeah.
go very stylized in the characters, and then we just kind of went, okay, this is what we have.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of worked around those limitations. Like
Yeah.
that's why we went so heavy with the grain and like the wear on the look, like really going for like a grindhouse 1960s 70s spaghetti
Yeah.
west. Because we kind of thought like, okay, this Unreal stuff tends to look uber sharp, like uber, and that could be kind of gamey looking. So we were like, let's do the opposite. Let's actually blur everything, soften it, add a ton of grain, add a bunch of scratches. And that was an artistic decision, but it was around those limitations. And
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
took us time to find the art direction. It was very difficult to, when you're doing something real, you're like, well, it's real. It has to look real. And then here it was like, it's not about looking real, but how do you make this look appealing? And we ended up with something really, really colorful.
yeah, which goes completely against our natural aesthetic. Like even the poster, you can see it's like a very dark looking image, but I think if people see the colors that we chose on the film and then they see the poster, they're like, wait a minute, these totally don't match. I think when you watch the whole film, you'll be like, oh, I see color wise it doesn't match, but the tone of it definitely matches the poster. Like it gets super dark. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the other thing I'll say that we really enjoyed about going stylized, it's not so much stylized, but all animated, is the amount of pressure we would get when we were shooting live action if you were ever on location is just overwhelming, right? Like you're
Yeah.
like, we're paying $5,000-$10,000 a day to be there, all in with
It's
the catering and everything.
one day flat cost is going to
Oh my
be
God.
at minimum $5,000.
Like I'll
right?
give you an example. Like on the Nino, we did this shoot and we closed off Olivera Street in downtown LA. I mean, we closed down a street in downtown LA. That we're nobody, right? We closed it down, and you have to rent a police officer to be there, and you have to have all this stuff, and all this stuff is just overwhelmingly expensive for us, right? If you look at it bigger picture,
Yeah, if your
it's
marble is
nothing.
like $5,000, it's like a penny to them.
But but we go to shoot, and the very first shot was this one actor pushing another actor. He pushed him too hard. The guy falls down, hits his head, and he's bleeding out of his head. There goes the entire day.
Yeah, so we
right?
took him to the
We
hospital.
take him to the hospital. That was our actor. Like now, what do? We can't afford to shoot another day.
He's,
Oh my God.
yeah.
So that kind of stuff, I'm so glad that we didn't have to deal with this. Or
Yeah, well, like let's say another shoot. So you learn from that. So then we chose another location which it's actually technically a museum. So what was that? I forgot what it was called, but it's in California. There's Victorian houses, which is a whole museum area. So it's like a whole block. So you can actually like lock down that area and keep a lot of
it's
outsiders
called
away.
Heritage Square.
Yeah, Heritage Square. And then everything was like super planned. But then all of a sudden, like one guy shows up and starts drilling his drill outside. And then the drill sound is like everywhere. And you're just like, who is this person? And then running around asking him, could you please stop drilling? He's like, I don't know if I feel like I want to
Oh
stop
my
drilling.
God.
Yeah, and then
And then,
they
like,
see
this-
you filming, they think
like,
that you have a bunch of money, so everyone is trying to like,
Yeah, so it's like, well, what are you going to give me for me to stop drilling?
Really? Really?
oh yeah,
Oh my
100%.
Yeah, and it's like, do you really have to drill? Nah,
we
but
had
I don't feel like stopping.
One of our friends was
So-
shooting something in New York, like with $0, and when someone saw that they were filming, they intentionally put their boombox out the window and started playing the music, and said, "If you want me to turn the boombox off, you have to give me $1,000."
No way, man. That's
Yes.
like out of a movie. I can't
It's out
believe
of-
people actually do this.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
So that part we don't miss. Another thing is like reshoots. We've done a bunch of re-recordings where we're like, oh, we needed this dialogue that we didn't capture. We needed that line that we didn't get, or something that the story grows, and we're like, wow, this would be great if we added this. when you're doing something that's animated, it's not that big of a deal to get the actress or actor to come back in. However, when it's live action, on the Nino, for example, the guy has a beard. And we were like, please don't shave your beard, right? Please don't shave your beard until we know for certain that we don't need to do any pickups. And then they had to shave their beard. And then now that pickup is going to require 3 months of that beard growing out. So it's just so freaking stressful when you have no money, right? Like if we had money, then I'm sure all that would be simple.
But I'd also see why things cost so much, right? Because so if you don't want that guy to drill, if you don't want someone to trespass, you just have to like, instead of, renting that house, you gotta rent the whole block, block down, and you gotta like get all this, have the money for just those variables, right? Like
Yeah.
helicopter gonna fly over
I wonder if some people make a living off of it, just like try to find these like big Hollywood shoots, and they just like go and just
camp outside.
Yeah, just drill, just ask for money.
Well, I mean, they kind of do it already. They do that. Like if you think about it, like when we closed off the street, they were like, you have to have a cop there, and we're like, but it's basically an alleyway. So why can't we just put like one of our friends to just tell people you can't cross here? It has to be a police officer, and you have to pay them overtime. It was a crazy amount of money when we rented a process trailer, which is basically like the flatbed truck that you put a car on top of, right? So you see it often in LA, like they're filming a scene of someone driving. They're not actually driving. It's the car is on a process trailer,
Right.
and there's a driver. So we're like, how much is a process trailer? And it was super affordable. It was like $200 for the day or $300 for the day. We're like, awesome, we'll rent it. But you have to have a union driver. How much is a union driver? It was like $800 a day. And I'm like, it's a driver. Like, who makes $800 a day as a driver? Like, as an Uber driver, it's insane. And it's literally, but we're driving down the street. We were shooting in the desert. Like it's literally in like Death Valley, basically. There's nothing that could affect anything besides a nuclear bomb, right? There's nothing that we could do to make it any more sandy. And they're like, you need to have the fire department there.
Yeah,
a fire truck.
So you have all these requirements. So you have to have a fire truck. It's like, why do we have to have fire trucks?
If I dropped a grenade in this place,
we're not gonna
you wouldn't even notice. No, but let's say we did. Let's say I threw a fucking grenade. You wouldn't even know it. So
yeah, because it was the middle of nowhere.
There was nothing to grenade. It was
but we weren't lighting any fires. We weren't it was like people talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly had no idea that like so much goes into actually live shooting. That's insane to me.
It's super stressful. I will say,
I mean, the voice in the hollow sounds like a walk in the park compared to El Nino.
Yeah,
it is to me.
The only thing that was hard on this was finding the initial cast because they're all in East Africa, so that was tough. But after that, it was pretty smooth sailing. There was one incident where the actress was like, "Oh, like we're like basically like 3/4 done. Like we just need one more pickup." And I'm like, "We need one more shot." She's like, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm available. It's probably better you just replace me with another actress." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, you don't understand. You're like the main actress. We can't just replace you. You're the voice, right?" So she was awesome and she came back in, but that was those moments of terror when they say those words in an email. It's better you replace me, and you're missing like crucial dialogue. You just want to cry. You're just like, what the hell
you're at
do I do?
You're at the mercy.
You hear that a lot, huh?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't feel like anymore. Just find someone else. Like
The thing that sucks is that you end up becoming so high strung because every time you send the email, you're expecting the worst reply ever. Like we've had situations where someone's grandmother died like 10 times, right? We had a concept artist. We had a concept artist on the Nino whose grandmother died 10 times. Like I was like, the first time I was like, oh dude, like that really affected me. Second time I'm like, well, the mother, the father, okay. And then by the fifth time I'm like,
how many people die in your family?
No, but it was the grandmother. And I'm like, how many grandmothers do you have? So that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Damn.
But
So there's
That's
that.
crazy. But like speaking of limitations, I wanted to say, some of the best movies were made under limitations. Aliens, right?
Alien, I mean, Star Wars. That's why I'm a big fan of the original Star Wars. It's all
Yeah.
basically, when you look
Yeah.
at like lightsabers that are back there, they're just crappy flashes from cheap cameras. Like the coolest props are just whatever they could find. So
And it works.
limitations are your friends. So.
Exactly.
But yeah, man.
Yeah,
Well,
I
thank you
can't
so
wait to
much
see this.
for jumping in today. I honestly think it was one of the best talks.
Yeah,
Like,
I really enjoyed it. It gave me so much insight into animation.
Thank you. My pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
I think it was amazing, and I think you're a very good natural instructor.
Yeah, I understood it very well,
Thank you.
and not by not understanding a lot of stuff. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah,
And I'm
that
like,
there's
oh, I'm less ignorant now.
there's that saying like you don't really have a mastery of something unless you could explain it to a 10-year-old. Do you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
the fact that I got it,
Yeah, me too. The fact that I got
and
it.
I have the intelligence of an 8-year-old, so that's pretty good.
That's a win in my book, man.
That's a win. So,
Yeah.
so thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for coming.
If
Thank
anybody has
you.
any last questions, if not, we'll close it up. Let's see if anybody has any last minute questions. We usually don't have last minute questions.
Oh, there's a new message.
So Jared says he agrees. He really enjoyed it.
It was very
Jared
cool.
is a prolific concept artist. So
Yes, he has a channel on Gnomon too, where he sculpts, and you can see how awesome he is. He's
yeah,
amazing.
I
I'd love to
snoop
follow.
on their stream often, and it's a much more fun stream than Tran and I, because Tran and I are like the Clear Eyes guys, right? We're like the lamest, most monotonous two people on the planet.
Yeah,
But Jared and Matt are like two psycho pirates, so
they're more fun.
much more fun. So if you could
Yeah.
ever be out there,
I'd love to. I'm new. I didn't even know that Gnomon streamed or had its own streaming.
oh yeah,
Yeah, so there's Jared, and then there's another series, the Archetype.
yeah, which is a Disney modeler, Letitia.
Yeah, Letitia, she's amazing.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely hit you up on how to get to all these awesome artists.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being on here, and I think it was very cool to feature animation. I don't feel like there's too much resources on that stuff, especially with all the principles and everything. I liked hearing about the different workflows and everything.
Yeah. No, my pleasure. And like if at any point I'd love to come back and talk more about it.
Next project we're doing, the one we're doing after this, it's going to be all live action.
Yeah,
But we're
Oh,
going to
boy.
try to do all the effects in Unreal. So maybe
yeah,
we'll
it'll
have you
be
come back.
different.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You guys are just like building up and just combining everything.
Yeah. Next thing, we want to do a horror thing. It'll be live action. We want to use like the Vive Mars, which is like this real-time camera tracker. So we would shoot it that way. So we're just trying to figure out what the story is. But yeah.
I'm looking forward to working on it, man.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys. We're gonna kick off the goodbye trailer here. And Alon, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yep.
Talk
Bye.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.